A and P, Piggly Wiggly, or a Safeway with that classic arched roof. If these names ring a bell, you lived through America's true golden age. Remember gripping your parents' hands as the cart rattled down familiar aisles? Back then, shopping wasn't a chore, it was a neighborhood ritual. But today, those iconic storefronts have quietly vanished, taking a piece of our history with them. Join me now as we take a trip down memory lane to revisit 15 lost icons, to find a piece of childhood that perhaps you've accidentally left behind. A and P. Do you know who the forefather of the retail giants dominating America today was? It was A and P. For many families, it wasn't just a place to buy groceries, it was a cornerstone of daily life. You'd walk in and see small shelves packed closely together, people brushing past one another to pick their items, and familiar clerks greeting you with a smile. It wasn't flashy and it wasn't overly spacious, but it felt like home. What made A&P the Walmart before Walmart wasn't just its size, it was the way they reimagined retail. They were among the pioneers who brought private label products to the masses, keeping prices low without sacrificing quality. They expanded at an unprecedented pace, building a nationwide network of stores when that concept was still brand new. With A&P, grocery shopping was no longer just a daily errand, it became a system, a habit, a part of the American heartbeat. But then, that very same massive scale became its weakness. As the market began to shift toward larger stores, more variety, and modern experiences, A&P was slow to react. They were too accustomed to the old ways, too big to change quickly. And gradually, the name that once dominated the nation began to fade. The biggest brand in America could not survive the very future it helped create. Piggly Wiggly. If A&P taught America how to scale, then Piggly Wiggly completely changed the way people shopped. Before they came along, grocery shopping wasn't what you'd imagine. You didn't walk the aisles picking things out yourself. Instead, you stood at a counter, handed your list to a clerk, and they fetched every item for you. It was fast, but there was no choice, no sense of discovery. Then Piggly Wiggly arrived and changed everything. For the first time, customers were allowed to walk the aisles, pick up products with their own hands, compare them, and decide for themselves. It was an idea that seemed simple, yet it was revolutionary. Because it didn't just change how we bought things, it changed how shopping felt. Suddenly, going to the supermarket became an experience. You could linger at the bakery, ponder what to cook for dinner, and discover things you never knew existed. That was the moment America fell in love with the freedom of choice. Jitney Jungle. In another corner of America, especially in the South, Jitney Jungle offered a completely different kind of experience. If A&P was the system and Piggly Wiggly was freedom, then Jitney Jungle was the excitement. They were one of the chains at the forefront of the discount and early megamarket models. The spaces were larger, the goods were more plentiful, and most importantly, shopping felt like an event. You didn't just go for a few small items, you went with the whole family. The carts were piled high. Children ran around, wide-eyed at every shelf. Adults discussed what else to stock up on while the prices were good. The atmosphere was always bustling and lively, like a modern-day fairground. The sound of wheels rattling on the floor, the hum of conversation, the voices calling out from the end of the aisle, all of it created an unforgettable memory. It wasn't just shopping. It was a part of the weekend, a part of the family, a part of time spent together. These stores didn't just sell food, they taught America how to shop. But what people remember most isn't the innovation, it's the feeling. Dominick's Chicago. In Chicago, there's a name that, when mentioned, brings back a flood of childhood memories for so many, Dominick's. This wasn't the kind of supermarket you just popped into and left. For many families, it was a place where they truly belonged. You'd walk in, and it felt like everybody knew each other. The staff remembered your name. They knew your usual order. Sometimes it was just a simple hello. But it was enough to make you feel like a neighbor, not just another stranger with a grocery list. Shopping at Dominick's was never rushed. It was a part of the rhythm of life. You'd run into neighbors in the produce aisle. Your parents would stop to chat for a few minutes with a familiar cashier, and you, as a child, just stood there, taking it all in, never realizing that these ordinary moments would one day become precious memories. But then, things began to change. Labor strikes, rising costs, and more importantly, a slow pace of innovation. As competitors grew more modern, faster, and cheaper, Dominic stuck to its old ways, and gradually, that sense of belonging was no longer enough to keep the doors open. Waldbaum's New York. In New York, Waldbaum's wasn't just a store, it was a fixture in the neighborhood. You didn't have to drive far. You didn't need to plan ahead. A short walk of just a few minutes, and you were in a familiar space. Quiet streets, families walking hand in hand to get their groceries, kids running ahead while the adults chatted behind, it all created a rhythm of its own. Waldbaum's lived in those small moments. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was simply always there, exactly when you needed it. A loaf of bread for breakfast. A carton of milk for the evening. Small things, but repeated every day, they became a part of the fabric of life. And then one day, it vanished. Not in a loud or dramatic way. There was no single, ending moment, just a gradual closing of doors. The streets remained the same, but something familiar was missing. A piece of the neighborhood's heartbeat had quietly slipped away. Alpha Beta, California. If you grew up in California, especially during the years when the West Coast lifestyle was beginning to take shape, then Alpha Beta was part of that scenery. The stores were bright, clean, and organized. The aisles were wider and airier, offering a modern feel that wasn't common everywhere back then. Walking into an Alpha Beta felt like stepping into a future version of shopping. There was a different vibe there, not the old-school neighborhood intimacy, but rather the confidence of a life on the move. An America looking forward. Faster, brighter, more convenient. But because of that, as new standards continued to rise, Alpha Beta slowly lost its edge. What was once considered modern became ordinary, and when they no longer stood out, they were gradually left behind. Kohl's, the grocery era. Today, when people hear the name Kohl's, they immediately think of clothes, clearance racks, and those famous coupons. But what not everyone remembers is that Kohl's actually started as a grocery chain. Before becoming a fashion giant, Kohl's was the place where you bought your milk, your bread, and all those other everyday essentials. It creates a strange sensation looking back, as if you're seeing a completely different version of a household name. And that transformation is a story in itself. Some brands vanish, some try to adapt, and some, like Kohl's, change completely to survive. These stores weren't just places you visited, they were the places where you grew up. They weren't just for buying things, they were a part of your childhood, your family, and the daily rituals you never thought you'd lose. White Hen Pantry. There are places that didn't need a massive neon sign to be important. They simply became an essential part of your morning ritual. White Hen Pantry was exactly that kind of place. You'd walk in early, while the world was still quiet. The scent of hot coffee drifted through the air, mingling with the smell of freshly made sandwiches. There were no long lines, no frantic rushing. Just a few familiar faces, maybe a neighbor, maybe someone you saw every single morning, standing there, sharing a few quick words before the day truly began. This was long before Starbucks was on every corner. Before coffee became a brand experience, White Hen Pantry was much simpler. but it was also more real. You didn't go there to check in. You went because it was familiar, because it was close, because you knew you'd see a friendly face, hear a bit of news, and carry a sense of warmth with you as you walked out the door. Those small conversations, those simple nods of greeting, that was the true value of the pantry. Grand Union. If White Hen Pantry was the simplicity of the morning, then Grand Union offered an experience that was truly ahead of its time. There, you didn't just buy groceries. You could stop by the cafe. You could visit the pharmacy. It was a space that combined multiple conveniences, something we take for granted today, but back then, it felt revolutionary. Grand Union had a slightly more premium feel. The lighting was softer, the aisles more curated, but it never felt distant. It maintained a sense of closeness, a place where you could do your shopping and then take a few extra minutes to rest, people watch, or simply enjoy the atmosphere. It was the kind of place where you didn't have to rush. You could stay a little longer, and that was perfectly fine. Jewel-Osco. For many families, Jewel-Osco was the perfect marriage of convenience and memory. You could get your groceries. You could pick up your prescriptions. Everything was under one roof. But what made Jewel-Osco truly special wasn't just the convenience. It was the green stamps. Every time you shopped, you'd receive those little stamps. You'd take them home and carefully lick and paste them into a booklet. As a child, you'd sit nearby, eagerly helping, counting every single stamp, waiting for the day there were enough to trade them in for a prize. Maybe it was a small toy. Maybe it was something for the kitchen. It wasn't about the monetary value. It was about what it represented. Because that wasn't just a gift. It was the result of countless trips to the store with your parents. It was a collection of moments accumulated over time. It was the anticipation, the excitement, and finally, the joy of redeeming something you'd earned. Those tiny little stamps held some of our biggest memories. In those days, the supermarket wasn't just a place you visited and left. They were places where you paused, where you connected, where tiny everyday moments grew into lifelong memories. And that is why, as these places began to fade away, what we lost wasn't just a place to shop. We lost a window of time that nothing else can ever truly replace. Pantry Pride Food Fair. There was a time when grocery shopping was inseparable from the shopping malls rising up across America. Pantry Pride and Food Fair were part of that era, a time when shopping wasn't just a necessity, but a weekend ritual. You'd walk in and the first thing you felt was convenience. Prices were lower thanks to their private label goods. The shelves were overflowing with a vast variety of choices. Families would push their carts through every aisle, shopping while soaking in the bustling energy of a rapidly growing America. It was the moment when shopping began to mean more than just buying things. But behind that rapid expansion were financial cracks that weren't visible to everyone. As costs rose and competition grew fierce, these models began to shake. And then, one by one, they vanished from the malls that were once so full of life. Lucky stores. Lucky stores didn't just sell products, they sold an idea. Shopping is luck. It was a simple slogan, but it was enough to make the entire experience more exciting. You weren't just running an errand. You felt like you were striking gold every time you found a great item at a fair price. Lucky invested heavily in their brand. From the signs and the colors to the way the displays were set up, everything was designed to create a distinct feeling. It wasn't just the store that was closest to you, it was the store you wanted to go to. But as the market changed, and as price became a harder factor than emotion, these brand stories slowly lost their power. Luck was no longer enough to compete with new models, where everything was optimized down to the last penny. Safeway, the vintage marina style. You only had to see that iconic winged or curved roofline, and you immediately knew it was the Safeway of yesteryear. That wasn't just an architectural design. It was a landmark. You'd drive up, spot that familiar silhouette from a distance, and know exactly where you were. Inside, everything followed a clear logic. It wasn't overly fancy, but it was enough to make you feel comfortable and at home. Details like that, seemingly small, became anchors for our memories, because they were repeated time and time again until they were etched into your mind. And then one day, those designs disappeared. The stores were remodeled, made modern, efficient, and sleek. But with that change, the sense of familiarity began to fade away. Winn-Dixie, the golden era. To many, especially in the South, Winn-Dixie wasn't just a supermarket. It was a place you trusted. You'd walk up to the meat counter, and behind it was a person you had probably seen dozens of times before. They knew exactly how to cut your meat just the way you liked it. They could give you advice. And most importantly, you trusted them. You trusted the guy behind the counter. That was a very simple relationship. But it's one that is incredibly rare in today's world. It wasn't about the brand. It wasn't about the price. It was about the human touch. Looking back now, we suddenly realize a bittersweet truth. In the old days, going to the grocery store wasn't just about grabbing a few items and rushing out. It was an experience. You took your time. You went with your family. You saw familiar faces. You remembered the scents, the sounds, and the narrow paths between the shelves. All of it formed a very real part of daily life. But now, everything is faster, cheaper, more efficient. You go in, grab what you need, scan your items, and leave. No talking, no pausing. No real reason to stay a moment longer. And perhaps that is what has changed the most. We didn't just lose the old stores, we lost the feeling of belonging somewhere. We didn't just lose stores, we lost a way of life. So what about you? Which store did your family consider home every weekend? Is there a specific scent or sound that you'd recognize even with your eyes closed? Please leave a comment below. I'll be reading and responding to every story because each of your comments isn't just text, it's a journey back in time that we're taking together. I'll see you in the comments. And in our next journey to rediscover the America of old.